Another year passed, and my personal life, or rather the absence of it, remained about the same as before. I still lay in the hayloft from time to time with one or another woman interested in getting laid, but I didn't have any serious relationships with anyone, and it was rare, if at all, to expect anything more. So I've almost come to terms with a life full of passion, but without true love? Yes, I admit I'm a hopeless romantic, and stop laughing at me. I have heard the phrase "time heals all wounds" many times in my life, and there is probably some truth in this. It just seemed like my time was dragging on indefinitely, haha. But still I noticed that I was gradually letting go of the bitterness and pain that plagued me. But I enjoyed the time I was able to spend with my children. Watching them grow and learn has been one of the real joys of my life. Brian, although he had just turned 10, was already beginning to show interest in the family business. He enjoyed helping me with various plants, especially the Japanese-style sand rock gardens. Unlike her brother, Danielle seemed more attracted to a career in healthcare, although she still had plenty of time to change her mind. After all, my daughter was only 12 years old. And by the way, if we talk about her tender age, it seems that Danielle has begun to realize that boys are not necessarily the disgusting and rude creatures that she used to think of them. It turned out that, according to her daughter's latest assessment, some of them were simply adorable. Well, yes, I knew that this stage of her growing up would come soon, but I didn't expect this to happen right now. It was my increased concern and desire to keep an eye on Danielle that prompted me to volunteer as an escort at the children's school party, Dancing in Socks, that fall. Well, to be completely honest, Angela and her new husband Mike also put a lot of effort into persuading me to help with this event. If you have children of the same age, then you probably know yourself how difficult it can be to involve parents in such cases. Anyway, I found myself there, watching a motley but excited crowd of children kicking, writhing, pushing and jumping around the school gym. Who knows what? The music was incredibly loud, and, okay, so be it. I'll spare you my opinion about the quality of modern music. I think, despite the fact that I'm only 37, I'm now officially an outdated dude, according to the younger generation. I don't even know the name of the other guy who sings, and, in my opinion, growls in Van Halen. I guess being so dark and cutting-edge music kind of sucks. Come on, it was funny. All evening I was focused on the children, almost completely forgetting about everything else that surrounded me. Perhaps that's why Angela suddenly appeared next to me and scared me so much. "Hi," she said, touching me on the shoulder from behind. "What?" I reacted a little sharply, twitching a little. I hate being in situations where someone scares me. "Why don't you go and talk to her?" Leaning over the loud music almost to my ear, she suggested in a raised tone. "Angie, what are you talking about?" I stared at her blankly. "About that teacher. Come on, he's that pretty brunette in the creamy brown sweater," Angela explained, pointing conspiratorially with her eyes and eyebrows somewhere to the side. "She hasn't taken her eyes off you all evening. It's all over here in half an hour, so come on, go while you still have a chance." I looked at her, puzzled. Is he looking at me? A woman? Angie must have got something wrong. I looked around the room as unobtrusively as I could, and soon found the woman she was talking about. This lady was indeed a brunette, and, in my opinion, looked more than just pretty. She was, at first glance, about 170 centimeters tall, and her skin was distinguished by an excellent golden tan, like mine. I liked the pleasant shapes of this previously unknown teacher even more. Even a thick sweater could not hide her high and beautiful breasts. Below the magnificent bust, her figure narrowed to the waist and expanded again, flowing into tight hips and a very appetizing, rounded ass. The knee-length skirt accentuated her slender calves, and also slightly revealed her hips with each step she took. I wonder, I thought, if she's wearing tights today, or if her legs are clinging to cool thin stockings now. For some reason, such a thought crossed my mind at the sight of this lady. Yes, she looked very attractive, there was no denying that. Right now, while I was staring at her, she didn't seem to be looking at me, although I wouldn't mind at all if she looked back. After a moment, I turned to demand more information from Angela. "Are you sure she was looking at me?" I asked, and there was a distinct note of disbelief in my tone. "Of course," Angie replied with a wide grin. "Trust me, man, women always notice these things. Come on, Don, get your ass up and take your chance. At least you're probably going to have a night of fun with it, but you never know. Maybe there will be something else." She winked. I shrugged my shoulders. "And why the hell not?" I wasn't dating anyone right now, and she was really cute. Moreover, even physically, she looked almost the exact opposite of Brittany. After thinking for a couple more extra seconds, I realized that I was not losing anything and decided to act. As if to encourage me, Angela gave me a parting slap on the shoulder from behind, but so that no one else could see it. "Yes, I'm coming, I muttered over my shoulder, lowering my voice. I smoothly made my way through the crowd of jumping children to the place where a pretty teacher was standing, holding a drink with a straw in her hand. As I got closer, I realized that although she was still far from the name lady in years, but still the age of the stranger was older than it seemed to me at first glance. Now, up close, I could see that she was about the same age as me. She definitely couldn't be older than me. When she turned to me, I was immediately struck by her eyes. They were an unusually bright green color. I had never seen a woman's eyes such a rich shade of green before, and I was curious if they were her natural color or if she was wearing some kind of contact lenses. "Hi," I said as soon as I had covered the last few meters of the distance between us. "I'm Don Summers, Danielle and Brian's father." She smiled at me. Oh yes, she had a very sweet smile, and held out her hand to greet me. "Hi, Dawn, and I'm Dawn Rogers." She introduced herself as we shook hands. Dawn and Dawn, I thought, and laughed inwardly. Such a couple will undoubtedly attract everyone's attention at parties. "I'm Greg's mom, and besides, I teach 6th grade here," she continued. "Nice to meet you, Dawn," I said, smiling. "Likewise," she jokingly saluted with her glass. "I hope you don't get me wrong, but it's quite unusual to see a single man as an escort at such an event." "I'm sure it is," I admitted, shrugging my shoulders, "but my children are worth it, especially since I didn't have any other things to do tonight." I paused when I realized that some of her words intrigued me. "How did you know I was single?" I asked my new friend. "Well, first of all, I see that your ring finger is free," she quickly replied, casting a sly glance at my hand. "Besides, that woman you've been talking to all evening came here with her husband." Dawn shrugged and continued, "I'm good at noticing details when I'm watching people, which is why you seemed like a loner to me." "You're doing very well," I complimented Dawn. "That's right, I'm really free at the moment." She grinned, looking down a little, and only then did I realize that I was still holding her hand. "Oh, I'm sorry," I muttered awkwardly, embarrassed, letting go of her palm. "It's not worth it." She burst into her delicious laughter again. "If I was against it, I would have let you know." Dawn's smile, as I had noticed earlier, was very sweet. She lit up her face like a beacon with some incredible inner light, and completely charmed me. Her eyes, either because of their strikingly rare shade of green or because of some other feature of them, attracted and hypnotized so much that I wanted to dive into their emerald depths and disappear there. In general, not only could I not take my eyes off her, I didn't have the slightest desire to do it. It was only after a few minutes that I finally managed to find a sufficiently coherent speech again and continue the conversation. To be honest, I haven't felt such a strong interest in a woman since Mandy. We pointed out our children to each other and each told us a little about them. I told her that Danielle had already talked about her desire to study to be a nurse, and also that Brian took great pleasure in helping me with my work as much as possible. Dawn told me about her son Greg's addiction to everything electronic and about some of the minor troubles that this love led him to. Obviously, he considered himself to be some kind of modern hacker. I was so engrossed in my conversation with Dawn that Angela managed to catch me off guard for the second time tonight. "It's time to get the kids, Dawn." Her voice suddenly sounded in my ear, almost making me jump on the spot. "DJ is already packing his things," she added, grinning at my confusion and pointing at the stage. Together with other adults, we began to prepare the children for departure. After making sure that each child is with their parents and no one is lost, we cleaned up the hall a little more, and then finally left the school. It seems that the excess of sugar in the blood and the level of arousal of our children began to subside a little, so there was hope that upon returning home I would really have a quiet and peaceful night. As we were leaving, Dawn imperceptibly and casually attached herself to my side. I was a little surprised when I found her arm entwined with mine and her elbow slightly resting against my side as we walked the short way from the school gym to the parking lot. "Call me sometime tonight when you have time," she murmured, stuffing a folded piece of paper into my shirt pocket. "I'd love to have dinner with you sometime." And then, together with her son, she went to her car, and a minute later they sped off. That night was a new beginning for me in my life. As you can imagine, I didn't wait long to call Dawn. She was absolutely adorable at that school party, and I couldn't get her image out of my head. Our first dinner date didn't end in the bedroom, but it did include some very nice kisses. It seemed that she was as attracted to me as I was to her, which, however, did not mean that she was ready to immediately throw all caution to the wind. Of course, I tried not to drive horses myself, but if the right opportunity presented itself, I would drag this green-eyed devil into bed in the blink of an eye. However, I am not one of those men who put pressure on a woman in this matter, so we acted at a pace that she considered reasonable. Dawn was an amazing woman in many ways. She was very smart and at the same time very practical. Like me, she didn't have any extra money to throw around, so she came up with a lot of simple life hacks to be able to save money here and there. She willingly shared her tricks with me, giving practical advice and thereby helping me free up some funds that were always needed for other purposes. I, in turn, found out that she was an avid gardener. She loved growing plants, especially flowering trees and vines. Unfortunately for Dawn, she had a brown finger, so in the end it turns out, unfortunately for Dawn, she was an inept, not very successful gardener. Fortunately for Dawn, I knew a lot of recipes to give sick plants a great life back, and I was happy to share these techniques with her. I was also able to help her set up the backyard of the house and the patio. With just a few inexpensive changes, and of course adding my own hands and feet as free labor, I turned them into a kind of cozy outdoor living room. The connection between us when we finally decided to take this step was just wonderful. Dawn's body was soft and seductive, her skin was silky and smooth, and the natural smell coming from her was incredible. She didn't have such a toned and athletic figure as, for example, Brittany or Mandy, and simply adored unhurried, sensual, and gentle lovemaking when we were in bed. The connection I felt with her in those moments was truly deep and vibrant. Whenever I entered her, our eyes invariably met, and we both really enjoyed these intimate moments. It didn't happen very often with Britt, and very rarely with Mandy. With Dawn, such a unity and eye-to-eye connection happened almost every time. Plunging into the transparent depths of these green pools, I slowly entered and exited it, giving this act a special intimacy that saturated my sensations in a way I had never experienced before. For the first time in a long time, I found myself thinking of it as a sensual and intimate love fusion, and not just as making love. Over time, I introduced Dawn to some unusual things in the bedroom, so nothing crazy. We just tried some new poses for her. I was only too happy to fix this situation. I've always loved doing this for my beloved women, but with Dawn, it was truly a wonderful thing to do. She had a lush but neatly trimmed bush at the bottom. When she was aroused, her natural feminine scent was seductive, and the taste of her juices almost drove me crazy. In those seconds when her body shook, Dawn was just going crazy. I had to hold her tightly by her writhing and trembling hips, otherwise I would have been thrown like a cowboy off a wild mare at a rodeo. Day after day, we became closer and closer to each other, both physically and emotionally. Dawn once told me about a period of her life that she called her wild days. When she was in her early 20s, she spent some time making love to anyone who had an erection, as she put it. To make it clear, those were her own words, not mine. The results of Dawn's turbulent youth were that she contracted a couple of sexually transmitted diseases, and after a while became pregnant with Greg. It became a catalyst for life changes for her. When she first saw her child's face, she experienced such a huge shock, which had a calming effect on her unbridled antics. At that moment, she realized that she would have to raise the child alone, since she had absolutely no idea who his father was. There were too many candidates, and she was not going to go to the Maury show. Dawn's parents were deeply outraged by her behavior. Fortunately, they quickly fell in love with their grandson. They agreed to let Dawn come back to them so they could look after little Greg until she graduated from college and received a teaching certificate. After all this upheaval, her life changed dramatically. Surprisingly, I became the first man she allowed to make love to her in almost 2 years. I was frankly amazed by the fact that in all this time, no one had brought this woman to the altar, which I told her about. She laughed at my words and admitted that in her past there were 2 men who tried to do this. Alas, both of them turned out to be cheating scammers, but fortune smiled on her. She found out about it long before the wedding vows, and thereby saved herself a lot of suffering. Of course, I told her about Brittany and then about Mandy. To say that she was overwhelmed by my complicated past would be a great understatement. Although, unlike other women I've told this story to, Dawn wasn't particularly bothered by the fact that I posted a video of my ex on the internet. Her opinion on this matter coincided with my own. Actions have consequences, and she, Brittany, really got off quite easily, considering all the circumstances. Dawn managed to get along well with my children, and I have to admit that her son Greg was a nice boy. The children themselves seemed to get along well with each other too. Greg was only a couple of months younger than Danielle, and they were in the same class. All in all, Dawn and I were doing very well, so well that when our relationship reached the 8-month milestone, I started thinking about marriage again. The painful memories of the Mandy disaster didn't stop me for a second. I wasn't going to let a bad past ruin my future. Of course, I knew that there was a chance that Dawn would say no, and inwardly I was ready for this, but I did not think that she would refuse. Nevertheless, I talked about it with my children. Danielle was thrilled when she heard about my intentions. Brian was less optimistic, but still assured me that he would be fine. Deep down, I think he still harbored the idea that I would ever get back together with Britt. In the end, I bought another engagement ring. The one that was meant for Mandy, I sold. Now all I had to do was figure out how to propose to Dawn. After thinking about it, and consulting with my mom, I decided to do it during my 40th birthday celebration, which was supposed to take place in just 2 weeks. It wasn't supposed to be a huge event, but my closest friends, my parents, and Dawn and her son Greg will be at the party. Yes, I thought, this would be just the perfect moment. The only real difficulties during this 2-week wait were convincing the children to keep a secret from Greg and his mother, sending a secret invitation to Dawn's parents and her brother, who was her only sibling, and also accidentally not to slip up yourself so as not to give away the secret. Finally, the evening of my anniversary celebration came. Actually, my birthday was the day before, but I was waiting for Friday night for obvious reasons. My parents rented a hall for a festive party at the local restaurant at Misha's, specializing in Russian cuisine, and I always had a real weakness for pies. It was a nice place and it wasn't too expensive. Well, among other things, it was suitable for children, which was an important plus for me. The dinner was excellent, and I enjoyed it immensely. All the invited guests had fun chatting at the table, tasted various dishes, and danced. Finally, it's time for gifts. I opened them one by one and thanked everyone who presented them to me. At the same time, I tried my best. Not by word, not by facial expression, not by gesture, not to betray my plans. Dawn was a little surprised when she saw her parents and older brother at the party, but she took it quite calmly. When I finished unwrapping my last gift, I realized with inner joy that I had managed to keep my surprise secret for her until the last moment. After putting the last gift on the table, I stood up, hugged Dawn, and gently hugged her to me. She rested her head on my shoulder, and I smiled happily at those present. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. I thanked all our family and friends, smiling broadly. You made this party a real celebration in honor of my best 40th birthday. The guests politely laughed at my little joke, and out of the corner of my ear I heard one of the children complain that he did not understand it. The louder laughter of the adults that followed served as an excellent cover for Angela, who crept up behind me, imperceptibly put the box with the ring in my free hand, and also quietly slipped away. There's one last thing left before we all go our separate ways. I received a lot of gifts tonight, but I hope to get another one, I said in as intriguing a tone as possible. Actually, I hope that Dawn will give me the best gift. Dawn turned her head and looked at me from the side with a puzzled expression on her face. I returned her gaze lovingly, meeting her eyes, and smiled. Dawn, I love you so much, I began. You have filled my life with real joy. The only thing that can make it even better is if you give me the opportunity to be with you for the rest of our lives. Without taking my eyes off her, I got down on one knee and handed her an open box with a ring. Dawn, honey, will you marry me? I asked the same question in a slightly trembling voice. There was deafening silence in the banquet hall when everyone, including the children, finally realized what was happening in front of their eyes. I eagerly stared into the eyes of my beloved, expecting to hear her joyful cries of, "Yes, yes." Now she's going to gasp, and I was waiting, and waited for more. The dead silence, which seemed to stop the passage of time in the hall, hammered on my eardrums and began to press on my temples like a hoop. I looked up into Dawn's wide, staring eyes. The outstretched hand with the ring began to tremble. Something was wrong. It's not like that at all. Dawn? I finally stammered. Honey, please say something. I, she muttered, pulling back from me and looking wildly around. Dawn, it's really not a good time. To talk about, maybe we should. Dawn stopped in mid-sentence and backed away from me. I sighed and stood up. My right hand, with the box clenched in my fist, fell powerlessly by my side. With my long-suffering heart, which was slowly breaking apart for the umpteenth time, I watched as Dawn, nervously looking around, found Greg, hurried to him, convulsively grabbed her son by the hand and rushed out of the restaurant, not even stopping to put on her coat. A few seconds after her hasty escape, I turned around and saw that almost everyone in the audience was looking at me in shock. Well, I said in a strained, upbeat tone. Anyway, thank you all for coming and making this evening so wonderful. I wish you all a pleasant night. I made a kind of bow of thanks with my hand, gave the widest fake smile I could show, and turned away and began to pack my things. A little later, as I was putting on my coat, I stared at the box with the ring, which was lying alone on the table. I was strongly tempted to just throw her anywhere, like I did last time with Mandy, but I didn't do it. I might as well get my wasted money back. So I put the damn thing in my coat pocket and motioned for the kids to come over. Dawn, darling, my mother said, coming up to me, lightly touching my arm. Do you want us to pick up the kids tonight? I just shrugged. I didn't really care right now. Do you guys want to spend the night with your grandparents? I asked them. Yes, that would be great, Brian exclaimed. Dad, Danielle began in a thin, sympathetic voice. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Danny, but you don't have to say anything, I interrupted my daughter, resolutely cutting off everything she could say. Right now, I was in no mood to hear any words of comfort from anyone, and fortunately, my quick-witted girl understood this. Just remember that I love you, Daddy, she whispered softly, clinging to me with suspiciously glittering eyes. Danielle hugged me, and her little hands squeezed me as tightly as she could. After a few long seconds, she let go of me, gathered her things, and followed Grandma to their car. My father lingered beside me for a moment. Well, the third strike, right, Dad? I said with a bitterness of black humor. Yes, the third strike, son, he replied, as if nothing had happened. Fortunately, life offers more than just one chance for a successful strike. Eventually, there will be other possibilities. Well, at least I proved that I still know how to choose the worthy ones, I said with the same bitterly sarcastic smile. Dad shrugged and sighed. You know, son, life throws us all into shit at some point, he said wisely. You're not alone in this, no matter how much I hate to tell you. All you can do is try not to dwell on it and move on with your life. Just keep your head up and try to deal with stress the way you see fit, he admonished me. Your mother and I will take care of the children, and if you need to talk, you know that we are always there for you and will support you. After giving my father a last hug, I packed up my things and left while Angela and Mike settled the bill. I saw that Angie was trying to talk to me, but fortunately Mike stopped her in time. I know she just wanted to give me friendly support in a difficult moment. But at the moment, the last thing I wanted to see and hear from any of my friends, including her. Fortunately, the road home was short. As soon as I entered the dark house, I double-locked the door, threw my things and gifts on the sofa, and went all out, trying to drown all the pain and disappointment that had befallen me in alcohol. However, my spree did not last as long as I might have liked. I do not keep strong drinks in the house, and the beer stocks I had were far from meeting the task at hand. I thought about going to the liquor store on the next street, but quickly abandoned the idea. Getting completely drunk and forgetting myself would have been nice, of course, but I definitely didn't need a severe hangover the next day. Instead, I collapsed into my favorite recliner and watched some 80s sitcoms on Netflix. After a few hours, I felt inexorably sleepy. That's how my joyful, crazy, nightmarish 40th birthday ended. I woke up the next morning, driven by a desperate need to go to the bathroom urgently, and I also had a terrible backache from sleeping for hours in a deep armchair. I need to remember carefully that it's not worth doing this in the future. I made a note to myself while I was doing my morning chores, and after that I took a cool, invigorating shower. After vigorously toweling and drying off, I put on clean clothes and went in search of breakfast, and at the same time aspirin for my health. Obviously, yesterday I still blew out enough beer to make a hangover bite into my poor head, damn it. As I fried the scrambled eggs, I tried my best not to think about Dawn, for these thoughts hurt me much more than even a headache. What went wrong? After all, I was pretty damn sure that she felt the same way about our relationship as I did. Of course, my treacherous mind immediately reminded me that I had already had a similar situation, and exactly the same feelings, and hopes when I proposed to Mandy. An idiotic mind that has never been able to figure out what all these women need in life. Fucking feelings, false hopes. At that moment, I decided that I had had enough, and that the concept of marriage was over. Starting from this day, only bedroom friends are my way of interacting with the opposite sex for the foreseeable future. I finished my breakfast and tidied up the kitchen. Then I went down to the basement and spent some time there working out on the simulator. Pure physical activity was just what I needed to dispel the residual alcohol fumes, relieve stress, and release the accumulated anger. After this training session, I had to take another shower, which I did. Wiping myself dry again, I remembered that I had not turned on my mobile phone after the disaster last night. When I got to my cell phone, I turned it on, and of course my voicemail inbox was full. In addition, there was also a bunch of text messages. First, I looked through the latest ones and found that they all came from friends, each of whom expressed their sympathy to one degree or another and offered to talk if I needed it. Voice messages mostly duplicated text messages with the exception of one, which was received from Dawn. It lasted only a few seconds, and her almost emotionless voice simply and briefly informed me, "Forgive me, my love. Please believe me, I have my reasons. I hope someday you will understand and forgive me. Goodbye." I haven't answered any messages or calls. I spent the rest of the day watching TV until my parents brought the kids home in the evening. That's actually the whole story of my life. In many stories I've read, a husband who has been hit by betrayal of infidelity ends up getting rich, marries a supermodel who is 15 years younger than him, and desperately wants to have children with him, lives in a posh mansion and enjoys choice steaks at every meal. I think everyone else, really like to listen to such stories, but I'm afraid that my life was not like that. It's been 10 years since my divorce from Brittany. Danielle is in college and studying nursing. I was a little surprised that she held on all these years, continuing to pursue her childhood dream of becoming a nurse and then perhaps a doctor. But of course, I am very glad of her dedication. Brian has just graduated from high school and is going to college in the fall. He is going to study business and get a degree in business administration. Will he want to join our family company? Only time will tell. I'm 45 now and I'm still single. From time to time I meet someone to have a little fun in the bedroom, but there is no one in my life whom I could call a special woman. A year ago, Mandy reappeared in my life in a way, so to speak. All she wanted was just to have a good time, only this time she made it clear from the beginning. For 2 months, she and I were regularly friends with organisms, without any long-term commitments, and then she left, without any hard feelings on either side. One day she asked me why I never got married, and I told her the truth. It's not worth the risk anymore. Yes, I would like to have a wife. I would like to wake up next to the same person every morning and know that she is mine and mine alone, to be sure that she will be there for the rest of my life. But some stories just don't have happy endings, and it looks like mine, at least for now, will be one of those. Dawn's parents informed me that she left town about a year after my unsuccessful marriage proposal. Before you ask, no, I wasn't looking for information about her. They came to me on their own in the hope that I could convince her to come back. I thought that this was some kind of madness, because it was the thought that she could be with me that probably pushed her away, becoming the reason for her flight and subsequent move. Although I don't know for sure because Dawn never bothered to tell me her reasons, and I just don't want to ask. Well, fuck her. Brittany, on the other hand, eventually got married. She and my son Brian spent several years trying to find a way to reconcile between her and me, but it just couldn't happen. I don't believe that people can change their true, natural nature. Britt was a woman of easy virtue, and no amount of regrets, apologies, or psychotherapy could have changed that. Eventually, they gave up, and she married the owner of the diner where she worked at the time. The children say they are happy. I'm happy for them. I hope for his sake he made that bitch sign a prenup. After all, she is still a very, very attractive woman. My dad died a few months ago, leaving our family business in my hands. I regret to say that I don't think my mother will stay with us for long. She grieves too much for her father. The sadness and unrelenting pain of losing him is visible in every look she looks at me, in every word she says, and in every movement of her body. Their marriage, based on tender love, trust, and devotion to each other, was exactly what I always wanted for myself. But Perhaps this is not possible in our modern world. I don't know. I'm just a landscape designer, and I'm an excellent specialist in this, and I'll leave the philosophy to the experts. Before leaving me for the second time, Mandy asked me an interesting question. Don't you regret anything? What is it? She asked. Of course, yes, I regret that I married a simpleton. I regret wasting the irreplaceable time of my life on Mandy, for the first time, and Dawn, thinking that they are my potential halves. And I regret that I don't seem to be able to meet anyone with the same life values and desires as me. But then I realized what Mandy was really asking me. In fact, she wanted to know if I regretted making Britt a famous amateur video star. She wanted to know if I regretted divorcing her as quickly as I could and hated that fool for years after that. My honest answer is no. Yes, I kind of regret that releasing videos online has become a necessity, but I don't regret doing it and I never will. She asked for it, and she got what she deserved. If I had to go through it all over again, I would do the same thing. Maybe I saved her new man a lot of trouble. If that's really the case, then at least something good has come out of this shit. As for me, I continue to work, doing my favorite thing. I will continue to love my children and watch them grow up, and I will look forward to meeting my grandchildren, when and if the time comes. I'm not going to give up and will never completely give up on finding my own wife who will become my soulmate. As I said before, to find you need to search. But this is no longer my top priority in life. I will enjoy whatever happiness I can find when and where it can be found. It's not the life I would choose, but it's not such a bad life. And yes, during my downtime in the office, I still allow myself to look at the world through God's eyes from time to time.